Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by
Harry Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, West Michigan Eye Care Associates, Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Calder Financial, Grand Management Group, Encore Business Group, and Rydan Investments.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.
Stay informed and stay vigilant. Happy to bring on this next guest. He's one of our favorites to cover the Pistons for us here. He was a late fill-in. I know he's on the road here, so hopefully his comms are good, but happy to bring on Coach Dave Dalton of the Piston Fanatic Podcast here. How you doing, Coach?
Hey, Ryan. Always great to be with you. It's an honor to be with you again. I appreciate talking Pistons anytime I can.
Well, and we're happy to have you here. As you can probably tell by my voice, I need you to bring it here. You've got a good voice. You were worked up on the last podcast that I saw, the last YouTube video that I watched of yours, and you had an interesting viewpoint. You're a pretty hopeful guy. I've talked to you a lot, and you like to be hopeful, but you were somewhat underwhelmed by the Pistons offseason. So I'm wondering if that's changed at all. There hasn't been a lot of reason for that to change, but I'm wondering if that's changed and kind of how we feel about things right now.
Well, I'm underwhelmed. I'm not that disappointed. And I mean, if we listen to Trajan, I always say that, fans get all worked up about this, trading for this player or signing that player. And the reality is we just need to listen to what Trajan says. And because he's been pretty consistent at what he said and what he's done. And that is, he says we're not going to make any drastic moves, which I'm fine with. And he says, we're in no hurry. And I agree with that. And that the main focus of our team and our team improvement is going to be internal, and that these young players are going to take a leap. And I fully expect them to. And if you look at it, the Ivy, Asar, Cade, and Duran, and even Tobias, those guys are pretty much going to play 30 minutes a game. And so everybody else is, going to play a lesser role. And so our key players are already there intact. And so instead of reaching out and getting another player that's going to take away minutes from those guys and even take away minutes from Isaiah Stewart or Ron Holland, there was no point, because I still think we are, as well as we did last year, we are still evaluating. We are still trying to see what these core guys can do. And he's got all these contracts so that, like, in 2 years, everybody's contract is up. So when the team is ready, which I agree with him, that's when we're really probably going to be ready to compete. It could happen in a year from now, but then he can make the big move, because he always talks about having optionality and flexibility, and we're set up to do that because we didn't go out and make a huge move.
Yeah, I agree with you, Coach. I know one thing that you said on the podcast the last time here, you were talking about how a lot of people want a new guard and they feel like they need a backup point guard. That's been an interesting take from my perspective, because I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but the idea that you have Ivy coming back, which is obviously a big help, a big story, and he's going to need minutes there. I always look at it, I am kind of a math-minded guy. I'm a finance guy. So you've got 96 minutes between the two guard spots. Yeah. And you don't have any more than that. You can play them other places if you want to play somebody at the 3 or what have you, but you don't have, no matter how you cut it, you don't have any more than that. Cade's got to have about 30 of that. Ivy's got to have close to 30. And then you've got other guys that are going to occupy those roles for other amounts of time. I think Robinson's going to spend time at the 2. LeVert, obviously, as a newer acquisition. Then how much time does that leave for the backup guards here? And once you start doing that, it's like, well, what do you want to get that's better than what they have? And how many minutes would you like for them to play? Because I liked Schroeder, as you know, and obviously the situation with Beasley was unfortunate, and hopefully Robinson fills a lot of that. But as far as those guard minutes, there's not a lot of minutes to be had. We had to take away the Hardaway and the Schroeder minutes to basically add in the Ivy minutes.
That's correct. And, because Asar really started playing more once Ivy got hurt. And so now we want to play those guys. I will say this, though. So my underwhelming part was I thought we could have and should have got a backup 4 that could shoot the 3, and there was Jake LaRavia that was signed by the Lakers for, I don't know, $6 or $8 million a year. It was very low cost. He showed lots of potential. He can shoot the 3, excellent passer, more than solid defender, young player still, so he could have been Tobias's backup. And then John Collins, they traded him for basically nothing. You know, it's a buyer's market right now. I mean, nobody's spending money, and even Danny Ainge was giving away Collins, Sexton, and there's other players where he usually would try to gouge people, but it's just not especially this year, there was nobody that had the agent money. So what was going to happen? There were a lot of people that wanted Malik Monk. I wanted when Malik Monk left the Lakers, I was a big proponent of getting Malik Monk. And he signed with the Kings for like $9 million a year. And he was like 24 years old, and he shot like 40% for the Lakers. But they couldn't re-sign him because they didn't have the financial space to do that. And so, I would have liked that. But Nickeil Alexander Walker, he was a special. I really wanted him, and according to speculation, it was between us and the Hawks, and the stinking Hawks got him. But he's the real deal. He's like 26 years old, excellent 3-point shooter, but a plus defender, more than plus defender. So he would have been, he had good size, and so he could have been part of our championship run in a year or 2 or 3, and we could have got him for 4. I think the Hawks got him for like 4 years, $50 million a year, which is very reasonably priced. So that was a disappointment. And then or getting John Collins or Jake LaRavia. So that was why I was underwhelmed. Not by we left ourselves with flexibility. We're going to get to see our young core grow and evaluate them and see what we need next. See, Ron Collins had a great summer league. What does that mean? That doesn't necessarily mean what minutes is he going to have. I am concerned that what happens if Tobias gets hurt, because we don't even have a backup 4 really. And I know that if you're playing those partial minutes, that Asar should certainly play the 4, and probably Holland can play some at the 4. But we'll just see what happens. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you were saying. We have a tendency to like a lot of the same players, Coach. That's why I feel like that's one of the reasons we have connected on the Pistons here. And I feel the same way about a lot of the names you mentioned. I think Alexander Walker would have been a great addition, because one of the things that I'm probably going to break this down, and we'll talk about the guard piece and then talk about the big guys after the break here. But as far as the guard piece goes, people are looking at the Beasley thing and they're disappointed. They should be disappointed. It's an upsetting situation all the way around. It's upsetting for him. Yeah. It's upsetting for the team. We don't have to go too far into that. But what's interesting about it is I was looking at the numbers that Beasley had before his year with the Pistons and that Robinson had before this prior year too. And they are remarkably similar. And so,
yes, they are.
And so I think that bodes well for if you put Robinson in this system with the screen setting of Duren and Stewart, with the passing of Cade and Ivy, which they didn't have last year for most of the year, and Thompson running around and creating space. All of that should bode well for a guy that moves well and goes off of screens well. He's used to that kind of stuff from being in the Heat system with Bam Adebayo. But the same could be said for Alexander Walker, I think, because he is a good shooter. He's not the same type. He's not going to shoot to the same volume, but if you got him to that volume, then what are you making his percentage? Because if it's holding fairly well, then you've got a heck of a player there, because as you said, he is a plus defender. He's somebody that's really going to, he's a shutdown defender, and putting him next to Cade, where he's spreading the floor and also taking, him and Thompson as a defensive combo, that'd be dangerous. Yeah, so that's kind of how I think of that, Coach, where that would have been nice to have. Robinson isn't going to be the same defensive player, of course, But I think Alexander Walker was probably their first choice. But I think because of the year thing and the contract that it extended out, I think they're looking to allocate that money to the core here.
Right, and going back to Walker, so you so accurately pointed out the 96 minutes at the two guard position. So Walker's a guard. I wanted us to get a backup four, so Walker was the best free agent that I liked the most. But if we had the guys that we had, and then especially once we got LeVert, well, if we would have got Walker, we would have got LeVert. But anyway, those 96 minutes would have been fabulous if you split them up three ways with Walker, Cade, and Ivy. So that's 32 minutes each. And obviously, if you give Cade a little bit more and Walker, Ivy a little bit less, and Cade plays 34, 35, and those guys play a little bit less. But that's just like the Pistons when we had Isaiah, Joe, and Vinny. Chuck Daly did that masterfully, Most of the time, Isaiah and Dumars played a lot more minutes. But if Vinny was hot, he would ride Vinny. And so, but we only played three guards that most of the time with the bad boy because that's how many minutes. So it didn't make sense like to take on Malik Monk when we had Karis LeVert and that sign and trade. They wanted to try to get rid of him, but Trajan didn't want to take on a 3-year contract and for $20 million a year for Monk. But we didn't need him. I might have preferred Monk to LeVert, but we already had LeVert. So, you can't pay guys $15 or $20 million a year and not play them, and they're not going to be happy either. So it just wouldn't have worked.
Well, there's some points in there I want to get to after the break. One is you were talking about LeVert potentially moving him into that trade exception. You brought that up in the podcast. I want to talk about the big guys because I do think that's kind of the last remaining thing that they have to check. But we'll take a quick break here and come back with Dave Dalton of the Pistons Fanatic Podcast. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.